Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 466, June the 19th, 2018, Tuesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, of course, the big news today, of course, was the testimony of Horowitz and Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray over in the Senate Judiciary Committee. We weren't expecting a whole lot because of who you have sitting on the Senate Judiciary Committee, a bunch of deep staters. Now, you do have old Chuck, who's the chairman, and of course he's a straight shooter, and I did watch his opening statement, and I managed to stay awake through most of it, but you know, I mean, there was nothing really major in his opening statement that we haven't heard before. Probably the only guy who really surprised me, who did a pretty good job, was Lindsey Graham. Now, I was working during the day when this was going on, but we had it on in the office, and I'm out and in between my office and back out in the warehouse, and in my office I'm back and forth all day, and I did manage to stick around for the Lindsey Graham questioning, and he did a pretty good job. Probably the most outstanding thing I noticed about Graham was I think he pretty well did a good job of destroying the narrative that there was no political bias. I think Graham did a good job of pointing out that it's over 500 pages, page by page, of political bias, and the idea that it didn't affect decisions or didn't affect the investigations, the two in question, is ridiculous. It was also pretty noteworthy that Lindsey Graham said, well, you know, your investigation is not over because I want you to investigate this and this and this, and he pointed out 2 to 3 things that he thought should be investigated and that the investigation should continue in those areas. So Lindsey Graham did a reasonably good job, but tomorrow will be much, much different when they get to the House Intelligence Committee. Actually, it's Intelligence and Oversight together. So you have like 9 or 10 guys there that are pretty good. And the guy to watch for tomorrow is the guy that you don't talk much about, is John Ratcliffe. John Ratcliffe is probably the best former prosecutor on that panel that will be there tomorrow. Ratcliffe is very, very good. If you haven't watched him before, he's very good. He'll ask 3 or 4 setup questions to get to the question he really wants to ask. So he lures people in, and he doesn't leave them very much wiggle room to get out of his trap. Another thing about Ratcliffe is that he drills down. If he doesn't get, you know, if you try to talk around him or work around him, he doesn't just go away and say, okay, I'll move on to the next question. He doesn't do that. Ratcliffe will stay on the path, and he'll keep trying different angles to get to the answer. So he doesn't, it's hard to get Ratcliffe off your case once he's starting to drill down on a point. He keeps coming at you from different directions. If you won't answer the question this way, he'll come at you a different way. So the guy to watch tomorrow very carefully, who might be the most effective of the questioners tomorrow, even though you got Gates and Jordan and those guys do a pretty good job, Nunes, of course, but watch Ratcliffe, John Ratcliffe. He's a very, very smart dude. He's very slick. He was a very, very good prosecutor. The guy had an impeccable track record as a prosecutor. He's tough, and he's tough to shake once he gets a lock on you. So watch Ratcliffe very carefully tomorrow, and I expect we'll see a lot more come out tomorrow. I don't know if Christopher Wray is going to be there tomorrow. I sure hope he is, but it will be Horowitz for sure. The custodian, who of course, Michael Horowitz, his job, of course, as the Inspector General, is to protect the institutions. He's the cleanup man. He comes in and cleans up the mess. And in the process, he's going to try to save the credibility of the DOJ and the FBI. I think it's going to be tough. He had a tough time with it today. It'll be worse tomorrow. So here's a couple things we also learned from the questioning today. We learned, number one, probably the most important thing we learned, is that we learned that James Comey, the former FBI dishonorable Federal Bureau of I'm With Her director, James Comey, the dishonorable James Comey, is the subject of an ongoing investigation. And it appears that that is in regards to mishandling of classified information. The very thing he was supposed to be investigating over in the case of the Rotten Reverend. So we learned that today, that Comey is the subject of an ongoing investigation. He didn't say whose investigation. That's the tricky part. We also learned that a grand jury has been impaneled. Now, we first got wind of that months ago, but was pretty much confirmed today by Horowitz. A grand jury has been impaneled. He didn't say as to what respect that grand jury has been impaneled, but we can assume it has to do with the matters that are being investigated by him, Mr. Horowitz, and we can assume Mr. Huber to some extent. Well, of course, we learned that Christopher Wray is totally unimpressive. Christopher Wray, totally unimpressive. No shit Sherlock Wray. Several times he was asked questions, he just deferred over to Horowitz. He acted as though the entire time he really could care less if he was there or not. He didn't seem all that interested. He seems very protective of people. He doesn't really seem like the type of person. He just doesn't seem like he's the right man for the job to me. I mean, he doesn't seem like much of a leader. He clearly isn't interested in unearthing the dirt. He wants to cover up the crimes. It's pretty clear that Christopher Wray was the wrong choice for FBI director. Not sure why he was the man who was brought in to do that job. Horrible appointment in my opinion. I don't know why Trump selected him, but bad decision. Christopher Wray is just totally unimpressive. We learned today also, on quite a few occasions, that Horowitz mentioned, in regards, especially when he's being questioned by Lindsey Graham, that he mentioned several times about giving excuses, because, as I said, the last couple of days, we have all these situations where Horowitz is investigating. He starts to get where he's sniffing the target, and then he lets it go. But as we learned from Horowitz today, it wasn't so much an issue of him letting go. The issue, according to Horowitz, was in many cases he had limitations. Limitations to documents and witnesses, and what he could subpoena and not subpoena, for various reasons. Some of that may be because there's currently a grand jury impaneled. Maybe the investigation going on would prevent him from getting some things he wanted, documents or what have you. But either way, you get the impression that there's a lot more limitations on Horowitz in his investigation than what we're led to believe, because we're told that Huber is there. Huber is there in case it's something that if Horowitz can't get a witness or he can't get a document, hey, you've got Huber. He's a prosecutor. He can get this stuff. Well, as it turns out, it doesn't appear that Mr. Huber is able to help Mr. Horowitz out very much, because Horowitz mentioned several times about his limitations to documents, witnesses, and to subpoena various things. So we can only draw the conclusion that Huber is not working as closely with Horowitz as we might have thought. Maybe they're working on something different. Maybe they're working kind of a separate track. It's really hard to say, but you don't get the impression from today's hearings that Mr. Huber is very involved at all. You hardly heard Horowitz even mention him. So we're just going to have to wait and see, but, you know, I don't know how much longer I want to wait to see. I mean, I'm pretty much there. I mean, I was ready for a special counsel, presidential commission, citizen jury. You take your pick. Any of those things that would actually start a real investigation and moving towards getting to the truth, because the IG has great limitations. Huber is also an insider, and we don't know if he's doing anything. And if he is, he's moving very, very, very slowly. We're not hearing anything about Huber subpoenaing these people, bringing them in front of grand juries, serving subpoenas on them. We're not hearing any of these things. And I find it hard to believe that these things would be going on and we wouldn't be finding out about it. If someone SWAT raided the Right Reverend Clinton for documents at her home or Lynch's home or one of these people, I'm pretty sure that would end up in the papers. But we hear nothing about any of these things happening. So I have a very low degree of confidence in how Mr. Huber is working with Horowitz on this. I just didn't get any impression at all. Maybe tomorrow in the House Oversight and Intelligence Committee hearings, someone will drill down on that just a little bit more and try to find out exactly what this investigation is, whose investigation it is, where it's going, and all that. Because really, we just never got any details other than the fact that, well, there's this investigation going on, but no real details. What investigation? Who's running it? What's it about? None of these types of details were brought forward today, so hopefully tomorrow someone can drill down on that and try to get some more information on it, and I think that will happen. Someone will at least try, I think. We learned today from Grassley's opening statement that Comey, Lynch, and McCabe all refused to testify to the Senate Judicial Committee. So apparently they were all given invitations, and none of them wanted to take Mr. Grassley up on it. Well, I think he said Comey's lawyer sent a letter saying that Comey was on vacation and out of the country. He's not. He was in Iowa. Wasn't out of the country at all. And he's been doing all the TV appearances, writing books, doing all these sorts of things. And since he's been fired, he's been offered 2 times to come and testify, and both times he said no thanks. So clearly Comey, Lynch, and McCabe are not interested in talking to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which means I can guarantee you they're not interested in talking to the House Oversight Committee, because they'll get a lot rougher treatment there, I can assure you. Both Grassley and Graham demanded that IG Horowitz investigate the use of secret email accounts by FBI agents, as well as the director and assistant director, and also they want the IG to look into this sort of bribe thing going on between the FBI and the members of the media. So both of these things, according to Grassley and Graham, need to be separate investigations on their own, which need to be looked into further. Horowitz did not say, he didn't come back to them and say, okay, yeah, I'll do it. They just said to him, we think that your investigation's not over. You need to drill down on this. While you're looking at all these other things, you need to have a separate investigation looking specifically at this bribe situation that's going on, which should not be going on because FBI agents are not permitted to exchange any information, and they're not allowed to accept gifts. They're doing both. They're not allowed to do either. And, of course, the use of these secret private emails including communicating government business. We already know that Peter's been stroking us, downloaded Wiener's file onto his private account, which is a felony, and we have a lot of this sort of thing going on. And so Graham and Grassley were pushing on Horowitz to drill down and have separate detailed investigations of these 2 things, which, he may or may not do. These actually should be looked at by Huber. He's a U.S. attorney. These are crimes. Oh, here's a biggie. IG Horowitz also admitted that Loretta Lynch and the Right Reverend Clinton campaign operative Amanda Renteria exchanged highly classified information during the 2016 campaign. It was so classified that when asked about it, Horowitz said he could not talk about it. So here we learn that Loretta Lynch is passing along highly classified information to one of the Right Reverend Clinton's campaign aides, Amanda Renteria. So classified Horowitz couldn't even talk about it. That in itself, again, should go to Mr. Huber for a criminal prosecution. Loretta Lynch exchanging highly classified information with a Clinton campaign operative. There you go. We will see how it goes tomorrow, but my general take, and I haven't seen it all because I was working and I was getting bits and pieces here and there. Tonight I'll have a chance to look at more video. But just from Grassley's opening statement and what I saw from Graham, and I saw a little bit of Cruz, my general take on it is that this narrative that they've had going for the past 3 or 4 days, that this was not politically motivated, or that no political bias affected decisions that were made during these investigations, is completely out the window. Out the window. I think that both Grassley and Graham did a pretty good job of proving that that's a ridiculous summary to come up with when you look at this report. Clearly, Everything that they were doing was affected by their political bias. And I think Graham did a pretty good job of pointing that out. Horowitz, to me, just looking at him, he seemed to understand that. I mean, I think Horowitz gets it. It was Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray that continues to be in complete denial. Complete denial. He just doesn't get it. I would just fire him. I mean, I have to look at the guy and think he's incompetent. If you still sitting here, the FBI director, and you cannot figure out that this is political bias that would affect an investigation, you can't be the FBI director. You can't be the head of the Federal Bureau of I'm with her. This can't happen. Because I can assure you, my friends, if you took the evidence, if this was a real criminal investigation in a federal court, and the IG report was the evidence being used, and you took this into court, and the judge got a look at it, I can assure you that the judge would look at all these evidences of bias, and the judge would look and say, there's a lot of political bias here. I'm sorry. I have to throw this case out. Too much political bias in the investigation. It would be tossed in a minute. This would never make it past any judge. Any judge would look at this and say, I'm sorry, there's just way too much bias on behalf of the investigators doing the investigation. This has to be thrown out. This has dirtied up the entire investigation. It's just all got to go. The case will be thrown out of court. Yet you have Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray sitting there pretending like this just doesn't exist. I mean, he's just, well, I think we all know what he's doing. But anyway, this is how I look at it. You see cases thrown out of court every day for various things, including bias, for a lot less evidence of bias than what we see in the IG report. The IG report is over 500 pages of bias, page by page by page. This would get thrown out of any federal case in the land by any judge. And it's obvious. And this is what Graham and Grassley point out. And if they didn't get the point today, I assure you they will get it tomorrow. No shit, Sherlock Christopher Wray. Totally unimpressive. What an embarrassment. Not the right guy for the job. He should be fired immediately. I should also note that these hearings only lasted 3 hours. It started at 2. It was over at 5. Not very long. Tomorrow they will be in for a much longer day, I can assure you. Well, bad news for Uncle Bob, the executioner. He is getting his ass kicked by these lawyers from Concord Management. I was looking at a story today where this is what the reporter was describing. It's like she's been at all these hearings, and she says that time after time, Mueller's team is getting their butt kicked. These attorneys for Concord Management that the Russians hired, they're some really good attorneys, and they're just kicking the crap out of Mueller on every single point. Today was no different. So, the lawyers advised the judge today that Uncle Bob the executioner's team has ignored over 70 discovery requests. He also stated that Mueller's team were not able to provide English translations for most of the documents that they introduced as evidence. So, to that, the lawyers for Concord said to the judge, so Mueller's lawyers do not have English translations to the Russian social media posts, but we're supposed to believe that Americans were influenced by these same posts? That's a very good point. If Mueller's team can't read these Russian trolls' postings, then how the hell would they expect Americans to be able to read them and be influenced by them? Mueller's team says that the 13 trolls were members of Concord Management. Lawyers for Concord say that that is not correct. They say it's not even alleged who they are. They are alleged to be associated with something called an organization, which these lawyers say is a made-up thing by Mueller's team. There is no organization that these 13 trolls belong to. He says Concord Management is not even alleged to have been part of such an organization, only alleged to have funded it. But those people, the 13 trolls, don't work for Concord Management. It's not alleged. It is not alleged that they work for us. So Mueller's team, clearly, according to this reporter in the courtroom, says that Mueller's team in these hearings is being completely outmatched. Not even close. Not even close. So apparently these are pretty good lawyers that Concord Management have representing them. And Uncle Bob is getting his butt kicked in court against Concord Management and the 13 trolls. Let's see. Close of business today. Rodenstein had not produced any of the documents that he's been told he needs to produce. So, according to Sarah Carter, her sources are telling her the same thing, that they received no documents today and that they are not going to be waiting around until Friday. According to Sarah Carter's sources, if they don't have something by Wednesday, that they might as well go ahead on Wednesday and have that House floor vote for impeachment of Rodenstein. Now, we're getting some more information about this story that we talked about yesterday about Roger Stone going to Nunes's committee and telling them about the fact that he was approached by this individual and asked to buy some documents that would be bad material on the Rotten Reverend Clinton. And we learned that Stone had just recently went to Congress to tell them about that, Nunes's committee. So, the question was, why did he wait so long? That's the question I asked yesterday. Well, now we know. Michael Caputo has also gone and talked to him. So here's what happened. Caputo and Stone have already both given testimony to several committees in Congress. But apparently, at the time when they gave their statements, they didn't mention anything about this, about the run-ins with this particular individual, because they thought it was, didn't matter. Nothing came of it. They didn't take him up on his offer, and there was a lot of things that happened during the campaign, and it was just one of those little things that was a bleep on the radar screen, and nothing came of it. There was nothing really to talk about, so they didn't mention it. But once they learned about Stephen Halper and there being inside informants into the campaign and things and such, they decided, maybe that was more important than I thought. So that's why both Caputo and Stone have gone back to the Senate, to the House Intelligence Committee, and revised their testimonies to make sure that this has now been entered into the record, the specifics of exactly what happened. And apparently it's connected between Caputo and Stone. So what happens is this individual, who we now know is a man named Henry Greenberg. That is not his real name. He uses multiple aliases. His real name, he's got several. We're not sure which one's the real one, but he uses several different aliases. Most of them are Russian, because he is a Russian national. I believe he lives in the U.S. and he might have U.S. citizenship, but he is essentially born Russian. His real name is Russian. He has a couple different aliases. Some of them are Russian, but the alias he uses a lot in the U.S., I assume in the U.S., is Henry Greenberg. So apparently what happens is Caputo is first approached by this man in early May, Mr. Greenberg, who says, hey, I know this NSA contractor who can get access to damaging material on Hillary Clinton. Would you be interested? And Caputo blows him off, says, no, we don't care. Everybody's got information on Hillary Clinton. Who doesn't? So he's not interested. So then this individual comes back to Caputo a couple weeks later, towards the latter part of May, and hits him up again. Caputo at that point says no. And as a matter of fact, my time with the campaign, what I was doing with the campaign's basically over. So I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I don't know who'd be interested in this information, but hey, maybe you can talk to a friend of mine who may know more about this type of thing than I do. I don't really deal with this type of stuff. But hey, call my friend Roger Stone. So it was Caputo that turned on Mr. Greenberg to Roger Stone, so Mr. Greenberg contacts Roger Stone, and they arranged to have a meeting in Miami. That meeting took place, that meeting took place in May, at the end of May, in Miami, Florida. In that meeting, Mr. Greenberg then told Roger Stone, that he had dirt on Clinton and that he wanted $2 million. At which point Stone laughed at him and said, well, you obviously don't know Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't pay for stuff like that, and he surely wouldn't give you $2 million, especially on stuff on the Clinton Foundation. There's been 3 books written on it. I've done my own work on the Clinton Foundation. Everybody has exposed the pay-for-play going on for the Clinton Foundation. Lack of evidence is not the issue, Mr. Greenberg. There are other issues and has nothing to do with lack of evidence. So, really, no one has any interest in we're never going to give you $2 million, or probably even $2. So just, forget it. Thanks for stopping by. Nice meeting you. Have a good day. See ya. And that was the end of it. So Stone says he never heard from Mr. Greenberg again, nor did Mr. Caputo after that. So he obviously gave up there. But now what happened was Mr. Caputo, once he realized that he may have been set up, just like Papagalopoulos and others, and once they learned about the games that were being played with the FBI putting Stefan Halper in as an informant, then he decided he would pay a private investigation firm to look into Mr. Greenberg. And that's where they found out that he not only had multiple aliases, but that in fact he has been an informant to the government for over 17 years. Over 17 years he has been a government informant and has helped the government on all sorts of cases. And he says even putting his life in danger at times. He stated this in a court hearing. We also know that we know that he was operating as a government informant because the private investigator checked his travel visas and found that he had multiple travel visas that were specially issued travel visas by the U.S. government. And they are the type of visas that the U.S. government gives to informants. I forget the exact name of these types of documents, but I've heard about them before. When you're working for an informant for the U.S. government, you get a visa through them, and it has a certain classification, and that's how you know that this person was working as a government informant. He was issued multiple visas as a government informant by the U.S. government. So we know for a fact, there's no question, he admits he was a government informant. He admitted it openly in a court hearing, and we now have the evidence based on his visas. The type of visas he received were the type of visas you get when they're issued to you by the government for the purpose of you being an informant, conducting operations with the government. Now, Mr. Greenberg was contacted. Initially, when he was contacted, he lied. He denied the meeting with Stone or Caputo. But once he was contacted again, presented with more evidence and information proving that he was not telling the truth, he then decided to tell the truth, and he admitted then, yes, okay, he did approach Caputo and Stone, and he says now he says he's telling something different about where this information came from. Originally, he told Caputo that it was coming from an NSA contractor who had access to it, but he told this reporter, when the reporter called back the second time and he finally admitted to it, he then told that reporter that the information was coming from someone in the Clinton Foundation who had been fired. In other words, a disgruntled employee of the Clinton Foundation. Now, whether or not this guy actually had any information or knows anybody or whatever, who knows? But it appears at this point that he is someone who has worked as a government informant for over the past 17 years. Sounds a lot like Mr. Halper and others like that. And my guess is this is another individual that now that the Senate or the House Intelligence Committee, now that they have his name and his aliases and they know about his past from the work that this private investigator has done, that they're going to be wanting to ask some questions and get some information on Mr. Greenberg and find out what sort of activities he was involved in and whether or not he has any association with the Clinton Foundation or anyone associated with the Clinton Foundation. My. The hits just keep on coming. So like I said, what we're looking at here, and keep in mind, this is really just the email investigation, and just what we're learning, just what came out today, just from these hearings today, what is going to be disclosed tomorrow. They got Peter's been Strokin's coming in. He's not going to say much. I don't expect much from that. That'll probably be a waste of our time. But this is going to continue to build. This is the beginning, not the end. This is the beginning. We still have other investigations coming up. Nunes is going to get those documents one way or another, if it means with a new Deputy Attorney General after Rodenstein's been removed from his position or forced to resign. I don't know. But eventually they are going to get their hands on these documents, and they're going to provide the answers that Nunes needs to get to where he needs to go. And that's eventually going to lead him into the intelligence area, away from the FBI and DOJ. Yeah, we know what's going on there, but if you want to get to the origins of all of this, and you want to understand the spying, and you want to understand the manufacturing of evidence, and you want to understand the setup and the frame-up, that was all being done through the intelligence apparatus. The FBI was simply used to get the FISA warrants, to be able to do things legally that the CIA can't do. But this was really largely an intelligence operation that was running continuously, and the FBI was just the helping hand to this investigation. This is all eventually going to be unearthed. Whether it takes them 3 months, 6 months, or a year from now to figure this out, I don't know. But it's pretty clear to me what it is already. So anyway, these things will continue. We'll see how the hearings go tomorrow. Obviously, it'll be a lot longer day for Horowitz tomorrow than it was today. I don't know if Wray is going to be there tomorrow, but if he's there tomorrow, he's going to get his ass fried because, you know, he's just not up to the job. I mean, he looked pitiful today, you know, really. So anyway, we'll see what happens tomorrow. So it all continues. The push continues. It's just a matter of time. There is going to have to be a special counsel, a presidential commission, a citizen jury. I don't care what you want to call it or what form it takes. There's going to have to be another type of investigative body to go look into this large conspiracy. Horowitz is looking at an email investigation, then he looks at this, then he looks at this, then he looks at this. He's looking at a bunch of individual things and telling us what policies and procedures were violated. But you have to look at this entire thing, and you have to go into it as an investigation, investigating whether or not there was a plot to set up Trump, frame Trump, take down Trump. As far as exonerating Hillary, that's already clear. I mean, to me, it's very clear with just one question. If, in fact, political bias was not the reason to exonerate Hillary Clinton, then what was it? It wasn't lack of evidence, was it? I think not. In fact, Horowitz himself admits in the report Hillary was guilty of violating the Espionage Act, mishandling classified information. Thousands of times. It's all over the IG report. There's no question that the Right Reverend Clinton violated the law. So the only question is, why was she not prosecuted for it? The overwhelming amount of evidence, circumstantial evidence, in the report shows that it was bias. Now maybe it wasn't bias, Mr. Christopher Wray, no shit Sherlock Christopher Wray. So if it wasn't bias, then what is the reason that the indictments did not happen? That's a good question for Mr. Wray. No shit Sherlock Wray. Ultimately, though, we'll get to the bottom of it. But there's going to need to be a special counsel or something with going into it with a focus which is looking at the greater conspiracy. All these individual things were part of a larger crime, a larger conspiracy. And that's how you're going to have to approach this investigation to understand it and to sort it out. And that's not the approach that's currently being undertaken. Another thing is that based on what we learned from this IG report, even though it falls short of being a real thorough investigation, it comes up short in a lot of areas. Still, even to the fact that it comes up short, I think it has proven overwhelmingly that the Mueller investigation should be shut down. It is totally compromised. Totally. Any judge in this country that would be given this case and would look at this report and look at the bias would end this investigation immediately. And that's what Mueller should do if he had the balls to do it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. Stay tuned.